Hello friends. Finally back in town. Bobby and I took off for the last week. We were in Mexico, but now we're back, ready to get back to work and finish up the all-wheel drive FK8 Type R. So while we were gone, this car went to fab. Shout out to the guys for getting this chopped off there. And the fab shop went ahead and made the Speed Factory manifold work with our chassis, with our engine placement, with all that good stuff. So as you can see here, comes nicely around the brake master cylinder and the reservoir and all that good stuff. If needed later on, we can easily shield that, put some heat protective on that if need be, because I do agree it is a little bit close. But I would like to put the turbo on and show you guys exactly how it's going to sit, because it is freaking beautiful. I need to grab some sort of clamp. I don't know if I got a clamp here for you, but this guy, I need a clamp. Let me clamp it on. This right here is the official turbo placement and tile 60 mil wastegate placement for the Type R. Looks absolutely amazing. I am in love with how straight it is. Of course, the compressor housing can be loosened and rotated. Well, it doesn't need to be loosened. That's gonna sit like that. Easy access to get that coupler on. And as you can see, there's no downpipe and there's no screamer pipe for the wastegate. I opted to not have them do that because I want to try and do that myself. I'm not sure when we're gonna get it around to that. I do need to get the materials ordered up so we can go ahead and get that tigged up later on. But what I wanna focus on today is moving closer toward the first start. And that's where this comes into play. This is our harness that we needed before we left. So here is where we left off with wiring. This is the entire K-Tune harness going into the plug and play Haltech adapter, goes into the 2500, goes into our dash. Now where we left off and what this harness should be for, if I'm not mistaken, is, and this was cheap. It was $130. Obviously we could have built it ourselves, but I would rather just buy it. So this guy plugs in there, click, beautiful. This guy plugs in, is it gonna plug in? Plugs in there. Okay, so now we have our OBD2 port, we have O2 sensor, we have 12 volt, so that's going to be a switched ignition 12 volt. This here is going to run to our fuse box, so that's our constant 12 volt. We have fuel pump, and we have an accessory, and that's where these relays come into place. Fuel pump relay, fan relays. So technically speaking, if I'm not wrong, all we're gonna have to do is run a wire to our fuel pump, run a wire to a switched ignition, and then up here we have this black wire, which shows RPM, and then yellow wire, which says MIL. I don't know what MIL is, if I'm being honest. I feel like I know what it is, but it's not coming to my brain. I do think eventually I am going to relocate our fuse box and relays and all that, but for now I just want to focus on getting this thing started and running. So for now, we are not going to relocate. It's going to be kind of a mess for now. Before we go ahead and install any of this stuff here, we need to get the battery placement done first, because of course without a battery you will never have power. Now that's where this comes into play. This is a kit I found on eBay, and this should have technically speaking, everything that we need to go ahead and toss the battery into the trunk. So here's the positive, the ground, some kinda not very nice mount, little battery tray. All right, we should be able to make this work quite nicely. Actually a pretty nice little setup for the cost. I think it was about $100. I'll link it down below. But 2 holes in the side here, cables go through. We have the box, we have this bracket to hold it down, and then we will top it off with the lid. This is gonna go in the trunk. running into a slight problem. I figured the trunk where the spare tire would sit would be a lot deeper. I don't think that's deep enough for a battery. From what I'm measuring and what I'm seeing, upright, not even a close fit. We lay down a full-size Group 35 battery on the side. Say if we went and got an AGM, which we can lay on the side. Still not a close fit, but there is such thing as a 51R battery. It's not a mini battery, still a full-size battery, but it's thinner. I think it's 5.5 inches tall, which if I go ahead and do some measurements, I'm sorry, it's not 5.5 inches tall, 5.5 inches wide. If we do the AGM battery like I was talking about earlier, that should be enough. Just picked up the 51R or the Group 51 battery, and you can see the size difference. So it's taller, but it's much less, it's much more narrow. And it is an AGM, and if you did not know, you can lay an AGM down on its side. So let's move forward with this wiring project. It is still a little bit too tall, and the reason for that is because there's not a complete flat area anywhere. There's all these humps and everything. So I need to do a slight modification and rebuilding of the trunk pan on the car, which is not a big deal. I'm gonna go ahead and cut that little square area out completely. We can sink the battery down just a little bit, make it nice and flat. Go ahead and rebuild it all. We'll be good to go. I have the base of the battery tray mounted, or not mounted, but made and bent. Now we need to go ahead and weld that in, fill the gaps on the side so it doesn't leak, get some paint on it so it doesn't rust, and we'll be done. I got the whole base of it made, tacked it up. I really don't think there's a need to fully weld it on. It's kind of a waste, so she stitched on there very nicely. Now I have this 3M bare metal seam sealer. I'm gonna seal it up, let it dry, slap on some paint. Here is the finished product of our little battery tray. Now, of course, if it was the same color, it would look better, but keep in mind, everything will be hidden under that. So now we need to get the battery mounted. We need to build a little battery strap, and then we need to run the ground and the power wire to the engine bay. Battery's in, ground is easy. It's gonna pop from there to there. Power, I need to punch a hole somewhere in the floor. It's gonna run underneath the car and up to the bay. Everything back here is complete other than the battery strap. And look at that, you'd never know we have a battery there. That was the end goal, of course. We have the wiring completed from the battery, ran underneath the car, up to the fuse box, just like the factory setup would be, only the factory battery is where our turbo is. Now what we're gonna do is move on to installing the complete engine wiring harness. We need to figure out where we're gonna put the Haltech, and we need to get the Haltech IC7 display chilling up in the dash, and then we can confirm we have power to everything. We have the majority of the engine stuff plugged in, transmission stuff, There's a couple wiring connectors on here I'm not going to use because this car is going to be drive by wire. We're not using a throttle cable. We are going to have to build a separate harness for that. Now the most important thing, getting this whole thing to run through the firewall somewhere. I am going to have the Elite 2500 either in the glove box or behind the glove box. So the best place to run all this through is going to be that boot right there. So it's going to be tricky, but it's a perfect straight shot right to the glove box, so it's going to work out good. The only other issue is this right here. It's supposed to plug into the fuse box, but our fuse box is way over there, so we do need to figure that out. Harness is ran through the firewall, just need to tie it up, and I was about to go ahead and mount the Haltech in the glove box, but being that I want this thing, and I've said it 1,000 times, but as factory as possible on the inside, meaning I still want the glove box as well. I found a better option. I pulled back the carpet. We have this giant, super thick foam piece right here. So all we need to do is go ahead, set the Haltech on here, trim a little section out. The Haltech is going to be mounted in this foam piece that mounts to the floor. We'll set the carpet down. It'll be completely hidden. Still very, very easy access, but it'll be hidden, which is ideal. Let's go ahead and mount her up. Our Haltech mount is complete. It's not very pretty, but it's hidden. We have everything installed with the standalone underneath the carpet. Wires ran up to behind the dash for the IC7 display. Now we have some of these wires here. A lot of these we're not going to use O2 sensor. I highly doubt that Josh is going to want to tune with the O2 sensor. We talked about this earlier. This is the wire that's supposed to go to the fuse box. I think I have a better idea for this. Instead of taking the wire, that 4-gauge wire, straight from the battery to the fuse box like we did, what I think I'm gonna do is run it on the inside of the car to about here. I'm gonna go into a little block on one end for the 4-gauge wire with 2 outputs. This is gonna go to one of the outputs. The other is gonna run through the interior, out the other grommet into the engine bay, and power the fuse box. I don't know why that wouldn't work. It's gonna be the cleanest, easiest, simplest, nicest setup. Red is ignition, blue is fuel pump, green is some sort of accessory. So we can deal with all that stuff later. That's not all that important right now. There's one other little thing that I want to figure out, and it's because of you guys. Saw this comment on, I think it was the last video I uploaded like 2 months ago. It felt like 2 months ago. Now it was like a week ago. But being that our clutch switch no longer works with how everything is wired up, if I'm not mistaken, a clutch switch is doing exactly, let me backtrack. So as of right now, how we're gonna have to start the car is turn on the ignition, the clutch switch is bypassed, and then this will be our ignition switch to start the car. So ignition, on, power the car, brap, 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 car fires up. I don't see why we couldn't turn this into our clutch switch. And I think our clutch switch is kind of the same concept anyway. I'm gonna do some testing real quick on it just to see, but if I'm not mistaken, like I said, I think our clutch switch is just it's another source of a ground. So when we push the clutch pedal down, it'll depress the switch and the car will start, just so we don't have to do multiple things, and it'll be just like factory. Did some testing, I was correct. There's 2 wires on the clutch switch, a yellow and a black. The black is ground. Yellow grounds when you push in the pedal. So all we have to do is connect the brown wire to the yellow wire. We're good to go. So I went ahead and made the wiring adjustment for the clutch pedal. So that should be our switch now, like it should be. And then I did the distribution block thing. So now, hypothetically speaking, we should be able to plug in our battery. Okay, we have lights, as you can see. And we should be able to depress the clutch switch. So push down the clutch pedal. And then we should hear a click, meaning our relay works. Oh, we got power. Perfect. Push down the clutch, the relay clicks. So what I'm gonna try real quick is just hooking up the starter wire, and we should have power. It should turn over. Now, of course, this is temporary. We'll have to build an actual starter power harness later on, but she should crank. She should crank. Let's try it first with the clutch pedal not pressed down. Okay. And now, yep, she cranks. Beautiful. Briefly touched on it earlier, but this car is going to be drive-by-wire, so we do need to build a complete drive-by-wire harness that comes out of the Haltech. It's going to go to the throttle pedal and also going to run up to, of course, the throttle body itself. Here's the throttle body that we're going to be running. This is a Bosch 77 mil, I want to say. So I got that. We got the adapter, pigtail for the throttle body, and then this is a 350Z or a G35 brake pedal or a gas pedal. The pigtail comes tomorrow, so we can't completely finish up this harness, but we can get it damn close. A couple hours later, because I'm not good at wiring, we have our diagram. There's our throttle pedal, there is our throttle body. We have two wiring connectors, an A34 and a B26 for the ECU. And then we have what they call an auxiliary connector, which we're gonna pull power and ground for the throttle body and for the pedal from the auxiliary connector. So we need to build a harness that looks like this. Obviously, it's got to look 10,000 times cleaner than that because it's a big mess, but we're making some progress. Wiring is always very tricky for me, but with enough practice, one day I'll be good, hopefully. So here's what we got to do. Pull a few connectors. This is the B26 connector. So we have 4 wires coming from there, 3 wires coming from the A34 connector, and then 4 wires coming from the auxiliary connector right there. So these guys are gonna plug back into the ECU, and then all 12 of these wires are gonna plug into this Doge connector, so we can easily plug and unplug our drive-by-wire harness that we're building. I do need to pick up some wire sheathing, I guess you'd call it, something like this. I have some janky stuff here from the auto parts store, but I want this to look good. We have all of the wires, the proper wires, connected from the ECU into this 12-pin plug. Now on the other side of this plug is gonna be this guy here, and it's gonna run to the throttle pedal and to the throttle body, but I need a whole lot of wiring before I do that, and it's currently Sunday, so I cannot get wiring here locally. All right, we got the ECU back in the car. Last thing I wanna try is see if we can get power to our dash. So if our ECU has power, like I believe it does, we should be able to plug in our dash and have power to this. Nothing yet. What did we do wrong? I figured it out. So of course, not only do you need power, but you also need ground. There's one ground wire that was missing. I plugged it in and I immediately heard some clicking going on from the relays on the harness. Peek inside, and lo and behold, look what we have. We have a dash that is turned on. That is so, oh, you guys can't see. There we go. Look at that thing. Coolant temp is working. Air temp is not because it's not plugged in. Of course, manifold pressure is not plugged in. Battery shows 11.4 volts. So we are getting some proper readings from our Haltech dash, which is so sick. We still have a long ways to go with wiring on this car, but to just see that, meaning that our ECU is powered, is a massive step in the right direction. Very, very excited. Very, very excited. Just coming along, my friends. I feel like we didn't make much progress today. All this wiring stuff takes such a freaking long time, but hopefully tomorrow we can finish up the harness for the throttle. Of course, if this was just staying drive-by cable like an old Honda was, it'd be a lot easier, but I want it done right with drive-by-wire. It's gonna drive better, be much cleaner overall, and I just feel like it's the right way to do it, especially on a especially on a 2021 Type R, you can't have a throttle cable. So as soon as we get that finished up, I have fuel pump wiring. We're gonna need some wiring and relays for the fans, but we don't need that to start it. We need fuel pump obviously to start it, and I do still need to run the fuel lines. We got a ways to go, obviously. I mean, just take a look at the interior of this car. Absolute disaster. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I'm gonna wrap it up right here. Peace out, my good friends, and I'll see you boys in the next video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.